I was here this morning for a stunning presentation by Nadine Cruz. It was just great, and I think that whoever planned this, hopefully we'll see how all of this works together, but we think that it's going to work together in a great way. I've got to share with you, for about 18 years, I preached to largely silent pews, and that's just the way we were. And when I went back to Shreveport, God intended for me to, and my wife, we joined a largely African-American church. Pastor Harry Blake is our pastor at the Mount Canaan Missionary Baptist Church. And all of a sudden, a whole new world opened. And I was, pretty soon, I was out on what we used to call, growing up in Shreveport, the Cooper Road. It's Martin Luther King now. And Papa Joe Martin came up to me and said, "You preach?" And I went, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, I want you to preach this morning." I looked at my wife. She said, "I'm out of this." And so I got up and began to preach about love. And I was wholly unprepared for what greeted me. The wonderful antiphonal response that takes place. Because in our churches, we know that no one should ever get up there by themselves, that we're going to be together in this. And it's a great theology of the pulpit. John Foster, you would love this. And so I started off and was not prepared for somebody that says, "Go on with it. Talk about it. Amen. Talk." And I had no idea what was hitting me. And there was a little voice in my head that said, "How shocking, this behavior in church." But there was another voice that took over that said, "Sick 'em, Tiger." And I'm telling you, I almost tore the pulpit up. They couldn't get me down. I was, I was going. And finally, they got me down, and Papa Joe Martin put his arm around me. He had been there 42 years. He said, "Now, Mac, if you're going to preach with us, you got to listen." He said, "We'll help you, because this is all of us in here together. There's never any power in the pulpit without praise and prayer in the pews." And this was new to me, And so as I continued to preach in our churches, I would hear, "Walk through it, preacher, go on." And man, I'd go. But I can remember one woman rather plaintively crying, Dr. Webb, when she cried out, "Help him, Jesus." And I knew I kind of had to get back. That someplace I was off course. And so I want to tell all of my friends in service learning, I want to tell all of you. Now, I wouldn't say this to a purely academic crowd, but I'm going to tell you this, and that is, I am wide open for you saying, "Help him, Jesus," because I don't want to get off course today. You're too important, and the work you're doing is too great. Well, it's important for you to remember what you do. You know what you do. You know, as the liaison between an academic community, but one that is also the residual repository of incredible energy, of massive intellectual properties, that you have a task to take this energy and this strength and be the liaison to a world that's hurting and broken. And we have to do this. And so we're going to leave this critical importance of how we fuse together this system that's been with us of higher learning at least about 6,000 years. We didn't always have it. But beginning in Sumer and with the training of scribes, this system now is so much a part of us. But how we've got to fuse that formal education with formal community renewal. That's the critical juncture that's got to be made. And it's got to be made because you're in a position much like my mentor, Dr. D. Elton Trueblood, who was the dean of the chapel at Stanford, and for my generation, was a great, great Quaker theologian, philosopher, and he was the professor of religion at Stanford beginning about 1937 to about 1946. And in 1944, he wrote a blockbuster book called Reconstructing the Foundations. And in it, he turned the famous phrase that America is a cut flower civilization. It's a poignant illustration of what happens when you become separated from your roots. And for a while you look pretty, but slowly that life that is so present begins to fade. And what's happening on the American educational front is when the rootedness of all the wellspring of lives begins to disintegrate all around us, then it affects our higher education systems, and people start blaming you for the lack of learning, etc. I heard this morning that we are now 12th in the world for folks that have actually now graduated and go to college. The 12th place in the world, 12th. We used to be number 1. And if this rootedness is cut, then how in the world can we begin to put it back? Because, you know, how do you get back down here to restore the well springs of life? How does a teacher teach a little boy who gets there late and his head is on his desk because he's been kept up every night till 1 o'clock watching a drug-crazed boyfriend beat up his mama? Now, how does he learn? And we keep trying to fix lives in our school system when we're not prepared to do that. Because we've got to go below decks, and we've got to affect this fusion of systematic community renewal as well as systematic formal education. That has to be made, because I promise you the institutions that you're a part of cannot fix community. They're a fundamental part, but they're not a foundational part. Now, I'm not trying to upset anyone, but I'll say to you, I've known too many PhDs, Dr. Webb, that are not good people. A formal education doesn't make you a whole person. Now, you're not going to be whole without being what we call truly educated, as we saw today, where we can take into account the whole world. So we face incredible obstacles, and they're huge, and they're real. In the Bible, they always talked about mountains, but they always used it analogously to obstacles. And I remember on several occasions, the one that many of us call Lord said, you know, if you have faith, if you'll step out, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it'll move. And I, for years and years and years, never spoke to that because I really wasn't real sure I really believed it. Because there are mountains all around us. People would never believe, coming to Louisiana, that we live in a gigantic mountain range. But we do. It's the mountain of racism, where a person is judged for this stupid millimeter of epidermal covering that we call skin. Racism. It's a mountain. How in the world do we overcome that? We have a mountain of ignorance. Now, you can have a degree and be, my grandmother used to say, ignorant. That sounds real educated, Grandmama. But you can have a wonderful education, be ignorant. We have a mountain of it. It's mountains. We've got a mountain, you know, I just call it a mountain of meanness. I knew too many people that could quote the Bible and they'd slit your throat and laugh while you bled. I don't trust them. They're just mean folks. That, what is it? The meanest man I ever saw always stayed inside the law. Mean. Mountain of meanness. A mountain of crime. Wasn't always that way. You know, we weren't always fearful. And now we've lived in the darkness so long our eyes have gotten used to the dark. You know, like we would in a dark theater. We don't think anything about it. You know, setting our alarms, going all the house, but we really do. In the back of our minds, my wife says, well, I'm going to go to the store tonight. It's 8 o'clock now. Is she going to get from the car to the store safe? Is she going to get from the store to the car safe? It wasn't that way always. Somebody, when I grew up, Dr. Webb is younger than I am by 10 years, but when we grew up, you know, if somebody said they had a burglar alarm for their house, we'd have thought they were crazy or had gold or something. Nobody had burglar alarms. They just didn't. One theologian said, he said it in 1946, we have improved ourselves emptier and emptier. So I wouldn't address crime and drugs and race. I just wouldn't. They were too big. But then something happened. It was about 4 years ago. I had seen on the Discovery Channel where there was going to be a show about dinosaurs, and I was hoping it'd be about Tyrannosaurus Rex. I kind of dig that kind of deal, and so I had tuned in. It was going to be on at 8 o'clock, true story. And I got there about 2 minutes to 8 on the Discovery Channel, and the screen was just filled with this whole glob of ants. And if ants could ever be in consternation, those ants were in consternation. And I was just about to hit the surf button. We guys can do that. It's an avocation. We can literally, I know y'all don't believe us, ladies, but we can watch 17 programs at once. My wife finally grabs this thing. Give me that. I want to see if they get married. I said, we'll get back to it. Hold on. And so I was just about to hit it. And the guy that was narrating said something that made me stop. And I watched for 2 minutes. And at the end of it was at the end of this show. It'd been an hour. I did something I had never, ever, I watched it 2 minutes. I did something I've never done before.